HOA raising fees for non-members not in the HOA. Check out this video in podcast form by searching Austin Stories wherever you listen, or check the video description for a link. Quick backstory. About 40 years ago and before my time, easement holders, EH, and the local HOA got into a very expensive lawsuit that was about to go off the rails. It was super petty too. Easement holders and the HOA families telling their kids not to play with each other. HOA then added locks to different areas for security and issued keys to both members and easement holders, and then randomly changing the locks without issuing new keys to the easement holders. They're pushing the boundary of what the easement allowed, stuff like that. And when the bills for the lawyers came back and how expensive it was getting, the two opposing parties came to a compromise. The holders pay the basic upkeep fees. The HOA allows the holders to partake in HOA events. For every 5 boat slips available, holders got 2, and both sides back off the petty stuff. This was written out, but never signed by both parties. And everything was fine for almost 40 freaking years. Little spats here and there, but nothing too outrageous. Recently, the HOA board members that struck the deal have resigned for one reason or another, death being the most common reason. Newer board members came in and started changing things up. They started enforcing obscure rules that haven't been enforced in years and making up new ones. One of the new ones was that the holders were no longer allowed at board meetings unless they, easement holders, were specifically on the agenda. And since most HOA members were friendly with the EH or holder families, the board decided that certain board meetings were to be board members only. And, you guessed it, most meetings were now special sessions. And now the original unsigned agreement that has been ignored, and a new one was written that the holders had to abide by all the HOA regulations or lose privileges. Enter G. G was a city boy who dove deep into the country-style living even though the area was now considered a suburb. Moved out there full-time and decided to really improve his property. G added a very nice barn-style shed for his stuff. He got several violation notices in the mail about how it wasn't an approved style shed and the color was not an approved color, even though the color matched his house. G has money and he paid for a lawyer to get involved to remind them that he is not a part of the HOA. G gets another violation, accusations of keeping farm animals in the barn and they were causing a nuisance. A lawyer gets involved again, and this time informs the HOA that the area is partially zoned for certain livestock. G now proceeds to get a couple of chickens and a goat. Cops are called this time on a tip that G had a rooster and they're not zoned for them. While G did have a rooster, local laws say that he is allowed just one. He countersues for harassment and wins. He gets another violation, this time about his dogs. G regularly brought his dogs to the beach. He wasn't the only one, as most people in the area did and would regularly bring them down to swim and exercise, even other board members. G was informed that he lost his boat slip for repeated violations of various rules. Didn't matter that anyone else was doing the same. Considering what the HOA insurance policy said about the beach, after 5 feet of depth, the swimming area was supposed to be off limits. Just so happens there's a floating dock that used to be for the swimming area, but now not because of said insurance policy. That is where he decides to put it. Back to court they go. The issue is currently unresolved. But as bills and fees went out in January, like they usually do, there's a special assessment fee added for the holders. Comparing the bills with a friendly HOA member, they did not get the same fee. Looks like they're trying to get the holders to pay for the bills that G is causing because G has deep pockets. The HOA has come out before saying that if they dissolved and sold to the town, that any holder's claim on the property gets super diluted to the point that it's worthless. Not sure if this is an empty threat or something else. Some of the holders and boat-owning HOA members have been trying to get an estimate from the board on how much it would be to buy out the beaches. The HOA board just responds with that the holders can't afford their asking price, even though they haven't given a price. Is there something legal you can do? Yeah, sue them, take them on down because you're not in the HOA, unfair fees, unfair rules, and holding on to them. This is just a mess. What would have you done? Some of the most obnoxious people I've ever met. I just need to get this off my chest. I have this neighbor, or set of neighbors I should say, who are so loud and obnoxious and disruptive that I always have to have some sort of music or TV playing to drown them out. Living above one of them, I always walk on my tiptoes as to be as quiet as possible. I don't slam doors or cupboards, and I keep music low unless I have to deal with the one outside. Neighbor number 1 literally sits on the porch all day and all night, smoking the funny. That's whatever. Sometimes it gets into my apartment, but it's only when the wind's blowing backwards. But what I don't freaking like is when he's out there tweaking and yelling at the top of his lungs about some imaginary crap because he's greening out or laughing at 3 in the morning for the whole complex to hear. And as a side effect to this guy never putting down the stuff, I'm assuming, he constantly blows snot rockets off of his porch audibly all day and all night again. It's muffled and quieter indoors, but you can still hear him if there's low volume music with the windows closed. You can hear it on the other side of the building too. And he does it when people are hanging out at the pool and everyone stares at him like, do you have any decency, or are you just out there to tick everyone off, trying to enjoy themselves? He also slams his door as hard as possible, which makes my front door rattle along with the wall, and I just think to myself, what a toddler, doesn't know how to blow his nose, screaming at all times during the night and slamming things around. This and his crappy music he blasts with the subwoofers that come up through the floor, which should be illegal. I would sign anything on the planet if it meant banning subwoofers from apartment buildings. Neighbor number 2 isn't even close to being as bad as number 1. He hasn't even been making that much noise up until recently. The thing that ticks me off with them is sometimes they'll blast Joe Rogan or some crappy talk show and I'll hear it through my wall. Or recently, they keep scraping something along the floor around 8 a.m. It sounds like an armoire filled with bricks, and it's woken me up a few times because I stay up late because it's the only time where I can get peace and quiet for a few hours. When they move whatever this thing is, it makes the wall rumble hard and I can feel it through my pillow. It hasn't happened in a while though, or maybe I just don't realize it anymore because I moved my bed to a different room to get away from them. At a few points, I've considered looking into nuisance neighbor laws, and number 1 definitely fits the bill for it for being an annoyance to the community because everyone can hear him and smell what he's doing. I don't really care about number 2 that much because he rarely makes any noise. But I'm not going to pursue the nuisance neighbor laws because I'm going to be going out of here in a few months, and I feel like if he can make a little noise, so can I. Which I don't, but I'm also on the top level, so I'm not sure how much of me walking around transfers down there as sound. And as a plus, he keeps addicts and other people away from hanging out in the area because he annoys the heck out of them too. And I also feel like it would make it way worse with the nuisance neighbor law if he was forced to do all his annoying crap inside instead of outside, which he would probably just move inside to do it after getting fined. I cannot wait to move to a nicer complex or a place with an HOA that jumps on people that are disruptive to others every single day. Yeah, thankfully you're getting out of there soon, so you don't have to deal with it much longer, but interesting you talk about going to an HOA. You know, they're supposed to be good, but power corrupts strongly. With great power comes great responsibility, right? You know who said that? Let me know. My neighbor is costing me a lot of money. What would you do? I'm not sure how building regulations work in other countries, but here's our story. My husband and I moved into our house September 2023. We were renting a storage unit for some extra things. The house came without a garage, so December, my husband hired contractors to build one so that we can give up the storage unit and put our things in there. Building regulations in our country state that you cannot build on the borderline of your yard without your neighbor's consent. The builders clearly understood us wrong because they built on the borderline when they should have built 2.5 meters from it. We thought, okay, no problem, we'll just apply for permission with new plans. The lady behind us had other plans. So she already called the necessary authorities and then complained, even before they finished building. My husband went to talk to her, and she said that she thought it was an apartment. That's why she complained, but if it's a garage, we can continue. Unfortunately, the damage was already done, and she already caused trouble for us. We had to pay big fines, redo the building plans, have an engineer come and do an inspection, and so on. On top of that, a week later, she denied saying that we could continue and said that she said to first get the plans approved and then continue, which is a lie. The authorities gave us permission papers to have all our neighbors sign. This woman told my husband that she doesn't want us in her yard, so that we can leave the letter in her postal box and then she'll fill it in. This morning, we find out from her that she went directly to the authorities, denied us permission, and complained some more. This was the final straw for us. We're about to become the neighbors from heck. Give me some ideas, just to bother her, not the rest of our neighbors, because we love them. She's also got a building on our borderline of our yard, against our yard, so I don't understand what the problem is. The builders did a really great job and it looks very neat. It doesn't obstruct any view for her or anything. My husband said he's going to pour salt water on that building's roof every day so that it can rust. Yeah, I mean, if the builders messed something up, even if they did a good job, if they got the idea wrong or the construction wrong, talk to them. Or take care of this Karen. What would you do? Oh, this HOA story is so good. It's called I Planted Bamboo That Overran My Neighbor's Property Over a Security Light. About 4 years ago, I used to live in a nice HOA in a small town in Texas and enjoyed having only one neighbor over my backyard fence. The plot was about 2 acres, and the other side of the backyard butted up to a hayfield. The stars were beautiful at night because of virtually no light pollution. Until the neighbor decided to install an incredibly bright security light over their back porch, aimed right at my back patio and bedroom windows. I tried to ignore it at first and put shades in the bedroom, but out on the patio, it was like having a bright LED headlight in your face all night. I consulted the HOA about adding a privacy addition to my fence to increase its height, and they said no because it's already at the 8-foot max allowed height. They said there was nothing in the bylaws or whatever about bright lights, so nothing they could do. So I hated for this to be the thing where we finally had a formal greeting after 3 years of back porch waves, but I walked over and rang the doorbell with $20. I politely explained how the light was causing the aforementioned nuisance and asked if there was any way that I could convince him to point the light down or in a different direction, and even offered to buy him a case of beer, the $20, out of goodwill, and even a new motion-sensing light. He seemed nice and agreed to point it down, but after waiting a month, nothing changed. I went back to have another polite conversation, and he said that he had changed his mind and was going to leave it on every night and leave it pointed as is. Petty revenge time. Needless to say, I was a bit upset that diplomacy had failed and started figuring out how to win. If the military taught me anything, there's always ways to adapt and overcome. So I started researching fast-growing plants to create big privacy walls and reading through the HOA bylaws and the city and state ordinances about what I could or couldn't plant and if there were any repercussions for encroachment across the property line. I quickly discovered running bamboo, despite being very invasive, would grow super fast to make the neighbor's house and light disappear from view, and there was nothing on the HOA state and city books to prevent me from planting it or cause legal recourse if it spread and grew on his side of the fence. The only thing he could do is cut anything that grew on his side of the line. So I pulled the trigger and planted a bunch of golden bamboo, which grows and spreads crazy fast in Texas and grows up to 20 feet tall. I didn't care if it took over the fence line because his house is 15 feet from the fence while mine was 50 yards away. So I planted a bunch right against the fence and only put root barrier on my side to prevent it spreading into my yard. Within 6 months, his house and light were gone from view, replaced by a pretty bamboo jungle row at the edge of my yard. Within 1 year, he complained that it was growing into his yard via mailed letters, and they went right into the trash with no response. He rang my doorbell once, and I looked at him through the window but just didn't answer the door. I unexpectedly sold my house and moved 2 years after planting for a career opportunity. It's been 2 years since I sold, and I just checked the property on Google Earth, and his entire backyard is bamboo. Oh, this is funny. As someone who has dealt with bamboo, this is almost nuclear revenge. And you should mail him a stuffed panda and a flashlight with a card that says, "Thinking of you," unsigned and with no return address. I think this is great because it seems so innocuous and innocent, and then over time, it's one of those ticking time bomb long plays, right? Then OP just takes the win in a creative way that you can't see coming at first. What would have you done? HOA declares my new house is in the HOA, but no, it's not in the HOA. Click the video on your screen so you find out what happens to the house, and I'll see you there.